Welcome to the short intro lecture to higher order functions. What's a higher order function? It's just a function that takes another function as an argument, or a function that can return another function. So let's look at that first example. If we were to take a function as an argument, what does that even mean? Let's say that I have a function called, I don't know, do something. Do something, what do we want to take as an argument? Well, normally you could take in, let's say I could take in someone's name, and maybe name is a string. Or I could take in somebody's age, which would be a number, right? Or you could even take in a list of ages, which would be like an array of numbers, right? Or I could even take in a class object. So like maybe the class object is like an object that says like, I don't know, students. It's an object that has students, and students is an array of names like this. And then after students, maybe there's another property of this class. What's something else that's in a class? Like maybe the schedule. I don't know. You get what I'm pointing at. The point is, for this do something function, we could take in our argument, in our parameters, we could take in like any data type that we want. And like we've said before, functions are first class citizens in JavaScript. And what does that mean again? It just means that you can pass in a function as a value. So not only are values like numbers or strings or arrays or objects, functions are also treated as values. So for instance, maybe we see that here on line 1 we have a list, which is an array of numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4. Super simple, right? Let's keep it simple. And let's say I have a function called do something. Let's say that do something, we want to, maybe for each of the numbers of my list, I want to console log. I want to console log something. So let's just say I could do something like this. I could do for let I equals 0, I is less than nums dot length. I haven't even said what nums is yet, right? I plus equals 1. We gotta give this nums, right? Like that. And then maybe at the end here, we just say console.log hello from, and we add, nums at I. So we do something like this, and if I invoke do something with my list, let's just try invoking this and see if we get what we want. Hello from 1, hello from 2, hello from 3, and hello from 4. Okay, perfect. So now we've got a function that prints out a console log for every single number in some list of numbers that we pass it, right? Now, this is where higher order functions can come in. We defined a higher order function as a function that can take in other functions as arguments, and it can also return functions. But here, we're interested in the part where you take in a function as an argument. So this code makes sense. I mean, we're iterating with a for loop, but JavaScript give us some ways to write this code a little bit more, expressively, maybe even a little bit shorter, simpler, more elegant. Let's look at how we can do that. So whenever we have a list of something, it doesn't even have to be numbers, but in this case we have numbers. If we have a list and we want to do something for every element of the list, kind of like a for loop, right? We're just console logging for every single element. What I can do is I can actually use a built-in JavaScript method, and this method is itself a higher order function. Okay, let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to take my list, which comes from line 1, and I do my list.for each. So you notice that with the dot operator, every array in JavaScript has this built-in property, the for each property. Every array has this, so you can always use it. So for each is a function. All right, mylist dot for each. Okay, so you can see it's a function. I'm invoking it with the function invocation parentheses. Now your next question is, well, what arguments does it take? What are the arguments for each? Well, the first argument is the item in the list. And in fact, let's be even more specific, current item. Cool. Let's actually just use that. In fact, I got a little bit fancy here. Sorry. I got kind of fancy. Sorry. Okay. Instead of being fancy, I'm actually going to give for each a function like this. So you see that I have my function invocation parentheses for the JavaScript array for each, but inside of those parentheses, I'm putting another function. So I'm literally saying, hey, here's my function, and I want you to do something with it. And by you, I mean for each. So for each takes in a function, okay? Let's add a space here, make it a bit easier. Oh, that's not easier to read. Just kidding. It takes in a function. And what it does, what for each does, is it invokes the function that you give it for every element, for each element of the array, okay? So that's why I was asking myself, well, what are the arguments to the function to the function that we give for each? So what are the arguments? If you don't know the arguments, you would just literally go to Google and say JS for each, and you'd look and see. But the first argument is the element, okay? So we're going to say for each, and instead of element, I'm using the word current item. That's just our parameter name. It's our current item is going to be like nums at I. That's what that is. So I'm going to say for each nums at I, you know what? Just copy and paste this. Copy and paste that. And I'm going to paste it there too, so I don't lose it. But now I don't want nums at I because, well, these words actually don't really make any sense right now. I don't have a nums in this context from lines 9 to 11. What I do have is this current item. Current item represents nums at I. So guess what? I can just delete it and put current item. So now you see I'm basically I'm saying, hey, for my list, whatever that is, it could be numbers, or it could not be. For each item in that list, invoke this function and do something with it. We have to write our function so that it works, right? But we're just saying for each item in our list, invoke this function. And in our case, what is the function doing? Well, the first argument it takes is current item. And all I'm doing is console logging hello from current item. And why don't I now differentiate this and say hello from our for each. And then I'll put a little marker so we can see what that is. Let me comment this out. And I'm also going to delete this because I'm no longer using my do something function. Let's refresh this page and invoke this. Here you go. Hello from our for each. Current is 1. And you can see that my list, the current element is 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. Nice. So we get access to every element of our array using this for each function. So for me, this code, does this work if I go oh, I love that shortcut. For me, this code is fine, but when I see mylist.forEach, it's a little bit more, I don't know, it's more elegant. It tells me more what's going on. For each element, do this. What's the next point here? The point that I want to make now is that you notice that, first of all, for each does not change my list. If I went after this and I said console.log my list, Will this work? No, I have to reload the page. Let's try that. You can see that my list, there's nothing different about it, right? And yeah, so it doesn't change our original list. I'm going to show you another higher order function here, and the next one that is important to learn, which is called the map function. So for each just invokes a function for every item of your array. And you know what? Before I show you the map function, maybe I should also show you the other arguments to this anonymous function. And by the way, anonymous just means it doesn't have a name, like do something. Like I didn't pass function do something. I just passed function with no name. The arguments to this anonymous function are the current item, the index of the item. Ooh, index, like this. Like I equals 0. So I starts at 0 for this for each function. If I were to console log this index instead, let's see what that looks like. Hello from our for each, let's say index. Refresh the page. I don't need to console log the list anymore. Look, our index is 0, even though our first item is 1, which makes sense because, you know, arrays are 0 indexed. And it logs out 0, 1, 2, 3. Nice. So we can get access to the index and the current item. There are a couple other arguments to for each. Like, for instance, you can get access to the whole array. Like, if I type array, it doesn't, by the way, it doesn't have to be array. This could be any name. I'm just calling it array because if you console log what this array is, let's look at it. To refresh the page, please, and then invoke. So now you can see that we get access to the actual array that we're operating on for every single element. And in this case, it doesn't really do anything for us, right? But you can probably, well, I'm trying to imagine cases where you might use this, but this definitely comes up because it's included as one of the arguments to for each. All right. Now I want to show you the map function. Okay, so let's just say that for each is when you when you want to invoke a function for every element. I'm going to comment out this for each code now because we don't need it anymore. Next, I'm going to show you the map function. What does the map function do? Well, the map function basically changes every single element of your array in some way. So let's say that I wanted to do something. Sorry, not the best function name here. But let's say I wanted to like double every single number in our array. So I want it to be like 2, 4, 6, 8. Maybe in our do something function, if I wanted to do that, I would say like, I don't know, const doubled, like the output array is going to be doubled. So I'm going to make a new array called doubled. And then for every element of our list, we'll do something like my list. Actually, I'm going to say doubled. Can I type? Doubled.push my list. And no, that's not what I want to do. I want to do double.push nums at I. Remember, that's how we get it in this iterative for loop. Nums at I times 2, right? That's what we would do. We're pushing into it the current element times 2. And hopefully that gives us our right answer. So if we return doubled, what does that look like? Got to reload. And let's do something. We got to invoke do something, right, before we use it on my list. Okay, and then we return doubled. Hopefully we'll see it in our console here. Let's try this. Okay, let's try a refresh. I don't see anything because I need to console log this value. And refresh. Let's try this again. There we go. So when I invoke do something on my list, it pushes all of the elements times 2 to the doubled list and then returns it. So then I get 2, 4, 6, 8 from 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice. This code here would be the perfect place to use the map function. So let's check out what the map function actually does. All right. Map. And we already said what this does, but it's when you want to change every element of the array. Okay, so we've got map, right? And how are we going to do this? Remember I was saying that JavaScript has the built-in for each function for every single array. So the same thing goes for map. So I have mylist.map. Remember, mylist is an array. I've already called it an array up here. And I'm using the .map because every array comes with this function. It's kind of like, you know, we've used .length for an array length, right? Kind of up here, nums.length. Length is a built-in property of arrays in JavaScript. They just have it. You don't have to add it. It's already there. So the same token, they have a .map property, which is a function. So we invoke it with a function invocation parentheses, and it takes in a function itself. Sorry if that's a mouthful, but it takes in a function itself as an argument, or as a parameter, right? So we're giving map a function, just like we did with for each. And conveniently, it takes in a similar set of parameters that we can use. So mylist.map, what do I want to do? Well, I want to say for every current item, I mean, you could even be more specific, right? Current number. For every current number, I want to do what? I want to return the current number times 2. That's what we want to do. The map function, when you're writing it, you need to think about what do you want to be in every slot of the array that you're changing. So we're looking at mylist and we want 1 to be 2. So whatever this function returns, whatever this function that I'm passing into mylist.map, whatever it returns will be in that slot. The first slot, and then the second slot, and then the third slot. So you have to make sure to return. If I just type current number times 2, it's not this function is not returning anything, and it will just give me undefined. In fact, let's check it out right now and see what it looks like. Mylist.map, I need to console.log mylist.map, like that. So we're going to console log this, and maybe to make it a little bit maybe easier to read. Oh my gosh, is that any easier to read? Maybe not. Something like that. Okay, so we're console logging mylist map, and let's just see what happens. So let me refresh the page and execute. So now you can see we get an array down here, undefined, 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 undefined. That's because we are not returning anything on line 19. We're doing this calculation, but it's returning undefined, since all functions return undefined if you don't specify it. So I have to type return current number times 2. Cool. Let's see what this does. Mylist.map, for every current number, for every number, I want to return that number times 2. Yay! 2, 4, 6, 8, which is exactly what we expected. I like that. I love that. Just like with the for each function, you have the current element. You can access the index of the current element. So we can even call this current index. And you can access the array that you're working on. I don't really use this array argument that much, but current index for sure I do. So yeah, that is map. Use map when you want to change every element of the array in some way. Here's a really important point. Map returns a new array. So if I go down here and I console log again, my list, check this out. If I console log my list, well, we see the map, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, But you see that my list, 1, 2, 3, 4, is the same. It hasn't been changed. So actually, this line 18, mylist.map, it is returning an entirely new array. It's not messing up my original array. So I could even do this. I can assign this whole thing as a variable. Now, what is this barking me at? Unexpected const. Oh, of course, I can't declare const within a console log, but my point still stands that outside of this console log, you could make a new variable that points to this array that is returned by mylist.map. All right. Oh my gosh, that's a mouthful. We're almost there. Next one is filter. I'm going to go through this a bit faster just because filter is similar. It's pretty similar to map, actually. All right. So you want to use filter when you want to return a smaller, and that's in parentheses question mark because it doesn't have to be smaller, but when you want to return a smaller array based on some condition. Okay, so yeah, probably a really popular example I would imagine is when I'm looking at my original my list, right? What if I wanted to return like every even number? So I could do that. Do I need my doubled? I don't need this anymore. So if I wanted to do something here, no, let's call it something else, const filtered. So showing you the iterative version first would look like this. We have a filtered array, and basically if the item is even, push it. So way to determine if something is even is you take the current item and you divide it by 2, and if the remainder is 0, then it's even, right? So, and if you didn't know that, then that's a common way to determine if something's even. If that is true, if it's even, you're just going to push the item, nums@I, and then we return filtered. Let's go and see if this filtered function works. We're expecting this to output 2 and 4, right? Just 2 and 4 because 1 and 3 are odd. So refresh this page. Let's see, I'm not invoking, so I need to invoke do something on list. Do something on my list. Let's try that. Oops. There we go. 2 and 4. So only the even elements. Now let's write this in a filter function. So this is another higher order function that's a property of every array in JavaScript. If we take my list, you got it. You probably already guessed that we were going to do this. But mylist dot filter, it's a property of every array. We're going to give this a function, okay? And that function takes in the argument, you guessed it, current item or current number. It doesn't have to be a number, it's just the current item that you're on. Filter takes in a function, and inside of this function, you need to specify what is returned, or what you want to return based on a condition. So let's just try to write a condition. We actually already have our odd condition here, so I'm just going to take that. I'm going to copy it and paste it. So we don't have a nums@I. Remember we were saying this is current number now. If the current number is odd, return current number. Let's check and see if that works. Like that. So now what do we want to do? We actually want to console log. We want to console log this filter. Like that. Oof, so hard to read. Okay, that hurts my eyes. All right, so we're console logging my list, and we're filtering out every single basically we're filtering out all the even elements. So if the element is even, you return current number. Let's see if this even works. I'm not sure about this. Let's check it out. There you go. We got 2 and 4. Are we invoking anything else? No, we're not. Yeah. So if the element is even, then you return. What if we wanted to get all the odd elements, we could just change it to be not equal to 0, right? Just invoke that. And yeah, it gives us 1, 3. So basically, filter is what you use if you're trying to filter out elements in your array. So like, if we just return current number in our filter, it's literally just going to return, well, let's see. It's just going to give us our original array. Obviously, as a new array, filter is just like map, that it returns an array. All right. How about we do this? Let's try this even simpler. What if we do current number? What if we return current number equal, modulus 2? This was our condition, remember? Equals 0. So we're basically saying current number modulus 2 equals 0. We say, if this is true, give me my current number. Two, 4. So this is actually how people usually use filter. They don't use it the first way that I kind of showed you. But you can see that we're not mapping the elements. Like, we're not returning the word true every time. What we're doing is we're saying, hey, if this function returns true for the current element, add that to my new array. And it does return true for 2 and for 4. So those are the elements we get back for our even elements. This one, you just have to remember that you are using some kind of conditional in your filter. Just practice using it. All right. Whew. We're almost there. We're almost there, folks. Okay. Let's go ahead and comment this out. Actually, I kind of like this code, so I'm going to save it. The last thing that we need to look at is another popular, but maybe not as popular method called reduce. Reduce is a bit of a tricky method, so I think that you should just play around with it to see what it really does. It's probably the most powerful method of any of these higher order built-in JavaScript array functions. But basically, you use it when you want to return one value. So that sounds like not really that descriptive, but basically, if you have an array of numbers and you want to do something to it, like let's say, what's a good example? I don't know. I mean, there's so many things you can do with it. Reduce. Basically, like if I wanted to turn this array into one string, or if I wanted to turn this array into an object, or if I wanted to add all of the numbers together, basically you're transforming the entire array into something. You could also you could use reduce to write map or for each. You could do that if you wanted to. It iterates over the entire array either way, but it gives you the power to create something entirely new, and it can be any data type. It doesn't have to be an array. But we will use it. Let's try this. So let's say we want to use the reduce function in a similar way, a popular way that people often do. Let's make a variable here in our do something called let sum equals 0. What we're going to do here is we're going to say sum. Each time we iterate, we're going to say sum plus equal nums at I, and then at the end we would return the sum, right? So if we invoke do something with my list, it should give us like 1 plus 2 is 3 plus 3 is 6, and 6 plus 4 is 10. So it should give us the number 10, right? So let's go ahead and try that. Are we, oh, we're still console logging down here. Let's go up here again. I have to console log this for it to work, or for us to see the result. All right, great. We get the number 10. So that's what we expected to see after adding all the numbers in the array together. This function right here is a classic example of when you can use reduce to make this code much shorter and more expressive. So let's try it. We're going to uncomment this stuff. I'm just going to change a few of these words because reduce is very similar to filter and map. It's a built-in method. But here's where it's not similar. With reduce, instead of just passing in the current number to this function that I'm passing into the reduce method, you usually, and I would say always, not just usually, I think you always need to pass in at least two arguments. And those two arguments are going to be called, these are classic names, and maybe you might not like them, so you can think of your own name, but accumulator, which is like the accumulator, or you know what, let's call it the sum. You pass it a sum and a current number. What the reduce function does with the sum and the current number is it's going to, well, let's actually check it out ourselves. So current number, what is current number? What is current number? Let's console log current number right now. All right, hard to see. I don't want to see my 10. I don't want to see this anymore. All right, 2, 3, and 4. Interesting. So current number first starts as 2. And then goes 3, 4. Okay, well, what if I console log sum first? Sum and then current number, and I call this sum. Like that. Let's refresh this. Okay, so sum starts as 1, and then the current number is 2. And then, look at this, sum is undefined while the current number is 3, and then sum is undefined while the current number is 4. Well, we need to add our sum and our current number together. And the way that we have set up reduce right now is that sum actually starts as the first number of the list. Now this takes a little bit getting used to, but basically we want to add our sum and our current number together, and we want to return that value because, check it out, watch what happens if I do return returned value. Watch this. If I return a value in my function, you can see that sum, after the first iteration, sum becomes this returned value. So whatever you return in your function is actually, it ends up being this thing which we called an accumulator to start off with. But that's what it's doing. It's accumulating values. Okay, so you actually need to return sum here each time, because sum is what's building up values until the very end. It's a weird concept to wrap around, but let's try returning the sum and see what happens. Okay, so sum starts as 1, and our current value is 2. Oh, sum is 1 on the second pass. That's not right. We wanted to actually add 1 and 2 together. We don't want the sum to be 1 every time, right? You can see that if I don't do anything to sum, it doesn't change. So I actually need to return sum plus current number. That's going to add 1 and 2, and hopefully the sum will then be 3 here. So I add 3 and 3, which is 6, and I get 6 for my sum here, which adds it to 4, which will be hopefully be 10, right? Let's try that. Nice. And we get 10. Let's take out, well, actually the console log is kind of helpful. So you can see you get your sum first starts as the first element of your array. I know it's weird because we called it sum and it's the first element. It's not the sum yet, right? But it's going to become the sum because we keep adding the sum and the current number. The sum is 3. Current number is 3. So we add 3 and 3 becomes 6. And then the current number is 4. We add those together and we get 10. And that's what we get. So that's what reduces, in this case, reduce is returning a single number from an entire array. But it can do a lot more than that. And this lecture is not, it's not long enough to include everything that reduce can do. But for instance, you can create a new object. You can create a string from reduce. There's all kinds of stuff. You can pass in an initial value. Like if I wanted sum to actually start as a different number and not 1, you can actually change the value that sum starts as. But let's not do that now. Let's just leave it to this. We've got this reduce function that takes in a function, right? That's what's higher order about it. It's a higher order function is when you take in a function as an argument. And the function that you're taking in has these 2 arguments. There are more, like you can use the index just like in the other ones, but this is good enough for now. And the first argument to reduce, the reduce argument function is the accumulator, which we called the sum, and the current. And to add up these numbers, you just return sum plus the current number. Oh my Lord, this lecture was a mouthful. I'm starting to think I should have broken this up. But if you can, go into your Chrome console and just console log things out. Console log things out exactly like I did. Try to write an iterative version. Try to write a higher order version. But that is in a nutshell what these functions are doing. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day.